started the Olivet Discourse last week, right? 2 weeks ago. You remember what we're doing is putting all three accounts together on the Olivet Discourse, all right? Now, this chart we didn't look at last time, so I just told you, but let's just look at it again. The three passages that are put together. There's like a disturbance over there. There's something. Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. All right? Now, what I was telling you last week is that some scholars try to cut out Luke 21, they try to say, because it seems in some places to be a little different. They say, oh, well, that was written at a different time, right? But there's no way that that could be written at a different time, because that would mean Jesus would have to be walking out of the temple for the last time more than once. Okay? So that's just simply, we put that to bed. Number two, some scholars will say that because Luke's account seems to be about the first century, it's clearly about the first century, the preterists will use that to say that all of it's about the first century. That's where they go with that. So I want to show you, it's very, very clear that Luke does talk about the first century. He answers one of the questions. The other two don't talk about the first century. They talk about the end of the age. But Luke goes on to talk about the end of the age also. So what I have done is here we have all three beginnings of all three, right? So let's just look at them quickly. This is Matthew. Jesus came out from the temple, was going away when the disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, that's later in the afternoon, "Tell us, when will these things happen?" What he just said about the temple, right? "And what will be the sign of your PERSIA, your coming, and of the end of the age?" And we've established that the word PERSIA, which is used here for coming, is a time period. All right? Mark 13, notice it's exactly the same events. "And he was going out of the temple, and one of the disciples said to him, 'Teacher, behold what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings.' And Jesus said to him, 'Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another, which will not be torn down.' And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew were questioning him privately. 'Tell us, when will these things be?'" The stones, right? "And what will be the sign when these things are going to be fulfilled?" Right? So that's said a little differently there. But remember, they're asking a question when they don't really fully get. They don't really understand that Jesus is leaving. That has not occurred to them because they just couldn't understand that at all. Why would Jesus be leaving? He's the Messiah. He's come and he's going to reveal himself to the nation. Right? That's what they were expecting his parousia, his revealing, to be. His coming was his unveiling as the Messiah. Right? So they were astonished at the idea that he was going away, and they didn't find that out till really understand it until after the resurrection. So they're asking about something they couldn't possibly know. You follow? But Jesus answers them based on what's going to happen. All right, and the third one, Luke. And while I just want to show you that it's the same discourse. It's all the Olivet Discourse happened at the same time on the Mount of Olives. That's so important for you to see. While some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, "As for these things which you are looking at, The days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down. They questioned him, saying, Teacher, when therefore will these things happen? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? So Luke's account is very much the same. And what will be the sign, Matthew says, of your PERSIA and the end of the age? They kind of, ask a question that's similar, but you have to understand, to them it was all going to happen at the same time. Matthew is giving the same question. They were asking, when is this going to happen to the temple? Because they're astonished. They can't believe that, right? How could that happen? That seems to be going against all the prophecies. But they didn't really understand it, but they believed Jesus' word. But then, when is that going to happen? And when are you going to be revealed as the Messiah, your PERSIA? And Matthew says the end of the age, because they understood it was all happening then at the same time. Are we on that? We're all together on that? Okay. So we started with this last week, if you recall. We didn't go very far. Ran out of time. So let's look at it again. First line, they all comply, right? It starts off with warnings to the early church. And I've put above it the title of what each passage has, and you can see how they line up almost perfectly. See to it that no one misleads you. That's the one thing about the end of the age that is always comes out first. Don't be misled. Make sure that you're not deceived. So it's really up to us, right? To really make sure. Amen. That kind of gives you an indication that deception is going to be very strong. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, will mislead many. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See to it that you're not frightened, for those things must take place. But that is not yet the end. The end is the end, the tribulation. Right? Jesus makes that very clear in verse 14. Verse 15. All right. Then Mark, see to it that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and will mislead many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be frightened. Those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. All right? So, wars and rumors of wars, which we're living in right now, we must not be frightened. Amen? Okay. And then Luke's account, see to it that you are not misled. For many will come in my name. How many of you know he was listening to the same sermon? Saying, I am he. Well, he wasn't, but he's getting it from the people he interviewed. The time is near. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first. Okay? But the end does not follow immediately. So there, Luke says it a little clearer. I don't know why I keep saying that. Luke says it a little clearer that the end does not follow immediately. So they say, but this is not yet the end. So they're telling us that it's there's a time lapse in between, right? That what happens in the first century and what happens at the end of the age. That there's a gob of time in between. All right. For nation will rise again. Now notice they jump to the end of the age. Right now, all three accounts go to the end of the age. How do I know that? When you look at Luke's account, you see he adds an extra word, which tells us it's the end of the age. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes, but all these things are merely the beginning of birth pains. Right? Remember, the end of the age is about birth pains. The tribulation is birth pains of the Messiah. It's birth pains of the millennium kingdom that's coming. Right? Then we've got Mark. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and also famines. These things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. They're identical, right? But from those two, we know it's the end of the age, but we can't prove it from those two statements, because earthquakes and famines have happened throughout history, right? So that's a tough one. But when we put it together with Luke, which is almost identical, we know that it's about the end of the age, and you can see it clearly. Then he continued by saying to them, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes, and in various places plagues and famines, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. So Luke nails it down that it's the tribulation period. It's the end of the age. Okay? That's how we know, because they're identical up to now, aren't they? All right. We're going to go on this way, and hopefully you can just put it alongside each other will really pay off. I think when you have that in front of you, you can look at it all the time. It's in the book, and you can be able to put the two together, all right? Then they will deliver you. This is the early church. They will deliver you to tribulation. Doesn't mean it's not happening still today, but it's specifically for them. They will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and will mislead many. Because lawlessness is increased, most peoples are the love of many. I really think that's a terrible translation, but they all seem to have that now. They think they've improved it, but they've not improved it. It's the love of many. And why is that different? Because it's many Christians. It's many of God's people. It's not most people, right? When you think most people, you think of the world. It's not about the world. It's about God's people. The love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end, the tribulation period, will be delivered. Amen? So clearly it's talking about believers, the ones who grow cold and the ones who endure to the end. Two groups. Mark is much shorter. Be on your guard, for they will deliver you to the courts, and you will be flogged in the synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings for my sake as a testimony to them. Okay? Now Luke gives us more information. Now remember, Luke he went around and interviewed all the players who were still alive, all the people who were with Jesus. And he put together an account for a Gentile. And he adds some things that he had picked up from them, obviously, right? And also because it's very close to the time when the temple is destroyed. I think that's why God quickened him to focus on the first century. Okay? But anyway, it doesn't disagree in any way with any of the other two translations. So he just adds some things that they don't answer. Before all these things, see that? Before all those things, meaning that's the next thing that's going to happen, that they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you to synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governors for my name's sake. It will lead to an opportunity for your testimony. So make up your minds not to prepare beforehand to defend yourselves, for I will give you utterance and wisdom, which some of your opponents will be able to, which none of your opponents, will be able to resist or refute. But you will be betrayed even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name. Yet not a hair of your head will perish, but by your endurance you will gain your lives. Now that all happened to them in the first century. All of them, with the exception of John, was martyred. And almost all the believers, you know what happened to them in Rome, and you know what they suffered, right? So that's what they were being warned about. Matthew 24, verse 14, right? The gospel of the kingdom, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and the end will come. So the early church is going to be persecuted and going to be martyred. Then the gospel will go to all the world. Then the end comes. Right? That's pretty clear. So you see how putting them together really helps, because now you don't have to say, oh, but it says over here and it says over there. No, you put it all together. Mark 13, the gospel must first be preached to all the nations. Notice Mark gives always a smaller, simpler version. Now, this is where Luke's account of the sermon on the Olivet Discourse is slightly different. That's because he focuses in on what's going to happen in the first century. The destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, that's what he focuses on. When will these things happen? The stones, when will they be cast down, right? But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those who are in the midst of the city must leave, and those who are in the country must not enter the city, because these are days of vengeance, so that all things which are written will be fulfilled. Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babes in those days. That's because it's going to be really difficult for them. But there will be a great distress upon the land, and wrath to this people. The distress is upon the land of Israel, and wrath is to the people of Israel. Okay? Because of all the rejection of the prophets, and finally the Messiah. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations. So it's clearly the first century. Right? And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Now, we've spent a lot of time looking at that and how that's been fulfilled in 1967 and so on. So that prophecy is already fulfilled. Okay, but you see how Matthew and Mark say nothing about this. That's why I left it blank. Okay, now verse 15 of Matthew 24. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, now we all looked at that over and over, so you know what the abomination of desolation is. It's when the Antichrist is revealed taking his seat in the temple, right? Which was spoken through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. That's the people who are living in Jerusalem and Judea must get out of there and go to the mountains. So they're not going to Judea, they're going out of Judea. So the only place they can go is into Jordan, to the mountains of Petra, the whole mountain range there, Nebo, all of them, and even further south. Some think they'll go down as far as Edom, and some even think to Sinai, but I don't know. We'll see. But they're going that direction, right? And God is going to give them, rescue them there. He's going to protect them, and it's going to be. I mean, you think about it. You know, for many years, people were teaching that Petra. You know what Petra is? It's a city that's in. It's an old city of Edom that's in Jordan. It's cut out of the rock. It's really amazing. The rocks are all, they got these caves in there, and they made them into like buildings. And there's all these gorgeous, carvings on the front and everything. It looks like a real city, but it's cut out of the rocks. And it's huge. And there's a bunch of places like that there. But there's this cavern going into it. It's like very narrow. You only get in with camels and things. You can't drive a car in there or anything. And people thought, well, hey, God will protect them there. But now we know that wouldn't protect anybody, right? In the modern age, they could drop a bomb there, drop a lot of bombs there, couldn't they? Right? So how is this going to happen? Well, it's the same scenario. Remember, it's the same situation as the Passover. It's a repeat of the Passover scenario. When God delivered the people out of Egypt by miraculous hand, and he parted the Red Sea, right? And they walked through on dry land, and he drowned all the armies of the Egyptians. It's the same deal. There's going to be an earthquake, and they're going to go through the valley in Jerusalem. They're going to walk out through it. They're going to flee, it says, right? By the valley of my mountains, Zechariah 14. And they're going to go into the mountains of Jordan. And it seems like the Lord is going to protect them in a supernatural way. There's going to be perhaps, the fire and the pillar of cloud and fire covered the camp of Israel and stood between them and Pharaoh. Remember that day we came out of Jerusalem and looked to the right, you can see the mountains. Yeah, it's the other side of the Dead Sea. Jordan is on the other side of the Dead Sea. Okay? When he talks about the Western Sea, it's the Mediterranean. The Eastern Sea is the Dead Sea. And Jerusalem is in between the seas. Right? The Atlantic doesn't come into biblical, it doesn't show up in the Bible, nor does the Pacific or any other, only the Mediterranean. That's the Great Sea. Okay. So you see, where were we? Okay. Flee to Judea. Flee Judea to the mountains, right? Whoever's on the housetop must not go down to get the things out that are in his house. Whoever's in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babes in those days. But pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. Now, see, that's very similar to what Luke said, but Luke clearly was talking about the first century. Right? Because he said, wrath of this people, they will be scattered to all the nations, and then Jerusalem will be trodden underfoot until it's not trodden underfoot by Gentiles anymore. Right? So that was clearly the first century. The same scenario is going to happen again at the end of at the tribulation period, the end of the age, the very end. All the nations, not just Rome this time. Rome represented all the nations back then, but now it's going to be all the nations are going to come up against Jerusalem again, the same surrounding Jerusalem. Okay? And that's why it appears the same, because it's a repeat. There was no abomination of desolation in the first century. None of those things happened. But Jerusalem was surrounded and was destroyed, and the Jewish people were scattered. And the same warning applied to them, get out of Jerusalem, right? When they see the siege coming. And they did. The Christians in Jerusalem, the Jewish believers, they got out of the city. And they used that prophecy that's what alerted them to do that. All right, so you see now why I've left Luke's account blank here. It's flipping on me. So sensitive. You're so sensitive. You see how that's blank? Well, that's because Luke is not addressing the same time period. Okay? All right. Mark's very much the same thing. That unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. And the elect is the Jews, because they're the ones who cannot be physically exterminated. Because if they were physically exterminated, the prophets would have been, their prophecies would be null and void, and God's plan and purpose for them would come to an end. You understand? And that can't happen. God's not going to allow that to happen. But for their sake, he cuts it short, because if he let it go any longer, there'd be no life left. That gives you an idea how bad it is. All right? It's not going to be, this is going to be all of the stuff that's going to happen. Now, Mark's account is identical, so I'm not going to read that. All right. We're leaving Luke out of this for a while, but later on, he has nothing. He jumps to the end of the age, and when we get there, we'll bring it back in again. You follow? These are the three accounts are put together because it's the same message. The same. All of these things were said on that afternoon on the Mount of Olives. Right? And if you're writing an account of what happened, there was an event, something happened, and you're writing an account, but 3 or 4 people went and they wrote down what they saw at that event, right? And you had all the notes of all the people who had been there, but you wanted to write a summary of what happened at that event, you would write all of those things. You would put it all together. And that's what you have to do, put it together. And that's what I've done for you. All right. How many of you see why that matters? How many of you don't care? You should care. Okay. Then we jump to, then if anyone says, oh, by the way, you notice Jesus said, when you see the abomination, then there will be a great tribulation. That's a very key point. So he clearly identifies the tribulation as beginning with the abomination. Not beginning 3.5 years earlier. It's not a 7-year period. It's a 3.5-year period. That's the mystery that the church needs to get a hold of. That's the thing that's missing. And that causes the rest of it to get all messed up. Right? But if you can find anywhere in the Bible where it says there's a 7-year tribulation period at the end of the age, please show me, because it's not in there. It's an invention. Somebody, meaning well, taught that the Daniel 70th week was the tribulation. And they wrote it down, and they taught it, and it's been taught on and on since then for a century or more. And people are having a hard time seeing it any other way, because that's what they were all taught in school. Okay? You all seem so, I don't know, like pensive. Okay, yes, it is a lot to think about. Now, another major point here that you need to get. And don't forget that you have the writing, so you can go back anytime. And you can ask me questions about this anytime. I care more that you get it than that we get through the class. Okay, I'm doing the class, we're recording it and all that, but please ask me any question when we get done here you want. We can, I don't know how much time we'll have, but please ask questions. There's lots of time. Even text them to me if you think of something you want to ask. All right? I'm not afraid of questions. I love questions. Because I'm confident that we've covered it. I'm confident in the material because it has been, I've challenged it myself in every possible way over 30 years now. I've looked at it from every angle. And I've listened to all the different views. And we're going to get into that when we get done with the Olivet Discourse. We're going to cover the different views and explain to you why we think they're wrong. Okay? And put them side by side. And you can make your own decision, but I think you'll see why they're not right. All right. So that's the big mystery. If you understand the tribulation is 3.5 years long, then everything falls into place. And you can see all the pieces clearer. All right. Then, if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. So apparently, There's going to be great deception, especially at the end of the age. Right? And the Messiah, notice how that's coming back again? We had lots of Gentiles claiming to be the Messiah, like Sun Myung Moon and all the others. But now we have a Jew doing it again. First time in a long time. In fact, I don't know, not since Bar Kokhba have we had, well, maybe. Schneerson, yeah. But in this generation, now we have another guy who's doing miracles and all that, claiming to be the Messiah. Yeah, I know a whole bunch of the guys with the coats are following him. Yeah, the coats. And there are obviously the people who are yearning for the Messiah to come. So bless them, but this guy is not the Messiah. But we're back to that again, right? And it's happening in Israel this time. Okay. So there will be a lot of that as we get closer. False Christ and Messiah, false messiahs will arise and will show great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the remnant of the Jews, including the Antichrist himself, because they will be deceived by him in the beginning until he's revealed. Behold, I have told you in advance. So if they say to you, behold, he is in the wilderness, do not go out, or behold, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming, or PERSIA, of the Son of Man be. Okay? I want you to notice this, and I have a little arrow going there. You see what it says in the book? Do you have the book? You must have the Keys book. That's where it is. But anyway. You see it up here, right? Look up here now, but it's in the book. Here Jesus uses PERSIA to refer to the end of the period. Okay? Later on, I'll show you where he uses PERSIA to refer to the beginning of the period, and it's unmistakable. Right? This is clearly the end. As the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. That's lightning. Have you ever seen really bad lightning? Yeah. You're driving along, and you know, it's pretty fast. But when it flashes from the east to the west, man, you cannot miss it. Now, I've seen that a few times, and it is like stunning, like that. And when you see that, Jesus is saying it will not, you can't miss it. Right? But that's the end of the period. That's the end of the tribulation when the Son of Man visibly appears. And every eye will see him. Okay? That's not the beginning of the tribulation. So if you understand that the PERSIA is the 3.5-year period, it's the second coming, which is a period and not an event. Just like the first coming was a period and not an event. Follow? Then it liberates you to understand the verses. But what we have going on is some people say, see, that's the end of it there. It comes like lightning bomb. That's when Jesus appears. But they don't acknowledge that there's a rapture before that Jesus takes the people out. But later on we're going to see he refers to the days of Noah and says the coming of the Son of Man will be like the days of Noah. That's the beginning of the period. Right? So which is it? The beginning or the end? It's the whole period. It's both. Did you get it? Did the light bulb go on? Okay. All right. You see the same thing with Mark is very consistent. All right. Now, Matthew 24 throws in this little line here, which I always thought when I read it for many years, I thought, why did he say that? It just doesn't fit with the rest of the passage. But it actually does when you know what it means. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Well, just, it's not a great picture, but if there's a body laying there for a while, you know, the vultures will come, won't they? Right? So where are the vultures going to come to? Where is this going to happen? Jerusalem, of course. Right? Get out of Jerusalem. Get out of Judea. Flee to the mountains. Right? Where is the Antichrist going to appear? It's to be revealed in Jerusalem. Right? Now, what are the vultures? The vultures are the armies that are going to come against Jerusalem. This is a reference to the armies that are going to gather against the city of Jerusalem, against where the body is. Okay? All right, that's just a little glimpse of the big battle, and then he switches. So he just throws that verse in, and we don't, not having no context, not knowing what he's talking about, we just totally miss it. Okay, but immediately after the tribulation of those days, there's a typo there. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. These are the cosmic signs that happen right at the end of the tribulation, and almost all the prophets talk about them. Isaiah, Joel, Zechariah, Zephaniah, on and on and on. All of them talk about the cosmic signs, the sun growing dark and the moon turning to blood right at the end of the tribulation, before the millennium. Okay? And this is what Jesus is doing. Again, he's quoting the prophets. But, and adding Daniel in there, because the Son of Man coming on the clouds with power and great glory. Right? But as I pointed out to you before, I don't know if you remember, there are 3 events there. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. That's one thing, right? So we have looked at Zechariah, and we've seen that it's very dark. The sun and the moon are knocked out. The lights are out. And at the end of the tribulation, I imagine the electric's out too, and the earth is in very bad shape. And people in the cities of the nations fell, it says. And there's major earthquakes, and if you can even picture that, you can't, because we've always had the sun and the moon. But if suddenly the sun wasn't shining, it's shining, but you can't see it. You can't. I got a little glimpse of that one time in Israel. They had a sandstorm when we were over there. I think it was 16, was it? I got a picture of it. I could look right at the sun. I was looking right at it. It looked like the moon. Now, if that were black, I don't know what causes this. It could be a nuclear. It could be nuclear that causes this. It could be natural, some kind of natural phenomenon. But it's likely all of the terror that's going on, and probably nuclear. Okay? I don't know. I'm just speculating. But with this, if you could just picture the sun being black, I think that's probably about the scariest thing there is. And it's not just at nighttime. It's in the middle all day, all night, and for about 10 days. There's no moon, no sun, no light, no electric. Darkness, pure darkness. Have you ever had darkness that was so dark you can't even see anything? That's what it's going to be. And the earth will be in chaos. And then it says the sign of the Son of Man will appear. Right? Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. That's going to take a little while. That's going to take a few days. Right? When I read it for years, I just saw that as one event, and it can't be. It's not possible. It would all have to happen within, an hour or half an hour. It's not going to be one event. And then the sign of this, and then they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. So I believe it's from, we've established this when we went through the feast, but I believe it's from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the Day of Judgment, the Day of Atonement, the Day of Judgment. And Jesus will physically touch down on planet Earth on Yom Kippur. That's why the feasts are just such a foreshadow of what is to come, right? And that's why we should really acknowledge them. All right. Mark has the same small verse. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory. He doesn't tell us about the cosmic signs. Notice Matthew says immediately after the tribulation. That's the end of the tribulation. Okay? You say, well, is the tribulation over? No, it's the end of it. It ends with that. It's after all this tribulation has taken place. Then the sun and the moon grow dark, the cosmic signs. Now we see that Luke has come back in, and we know it's the same thing because he says there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. What's that from? That's tsunamis, real tsunamis caused by things falling out of the sky and earthquakes and all the rest of it. And can you imagine? We've had a few of those, and they were terrifying. Right? And that, of course, will fulfill the words of the prophets about the islands moving out of their places and mountains moving and so on. That happens with that kind of earthquake activity. Then, men fainting from fear and the expectation of the things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, you can see clearly that that's a time that everybody's aware of. That's not, you can't come as a thief in the night at that time. Right? Because that's ridiculous. The whole house is blown up. What are you talking about? You know, everybody's going to know it's the end of the age. Everybody's going to know they're in big trouble. Everybody's going to know that God has come to judge them. Right? So that's why the rapture happens before that, because it comes as a thief in the night. The day of the Lord, which is the tribulation, comes as a thief in the night. The people that are taken, one is taken, one is left, comes like a thief in the night. Right? You see how Luke is back in now? He waits till the tribulation and he comes back in. See that? He went from the first century right to the tribulation. That's why we left him out of all the middle part. And then he says, then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So there's no difference between the stories, okay, the writing. All right, we'll drop it there at the end of Jesus coming through the clouds, and then we'll go forward next time. All right?